Alright, we're here just doing a quick little video about reviewing the website that I've been putting together for my race and ethnics class. So I've given Alyssa here some time to look over the assignment and come up with a couple of questions that we'll go over. Excuse me. So what are the questions that you have?
Okay, so my first question is they get really offended about segregation in general, so why do they self-segregate themselves? Or self-segregate.
Okay, so if I remember right, that was like on the first page? No, that was under social constructionism. Okay, so self-segregation, when I talk about that, we were talking about how it's more a coping device, meaning that they do it to deal with the discrimination that they are facing. And so when I said, let's see, where is it? So how have Arabs learned to cope with these acts of discrimination against them? I believe that they too often withdraw and self-segregate, and self-segregation is the response of many. They don't want to lose their rich cultural heritage, which is understandable, but they are not accepted as easily by others. So basically, when they're discriminated against, it's easier for them to just kind of pull away because they don't have to then face like how they're treated by other people, by the dominant group. They're with people who have similar beliefs, and it's just an easier way to cope with discrimination rather than just fronting it and dealing with that conflict and addressing it and calling people out. So it's just an easier way. It's a more passive way to cope with problems, and I think it's a big one that they kind of do. I think that they just kind of withdraw and self-segregate themselves, and kind of keep to their community, their culture, and to those that have similar beliefs. That answer your question? Okay. All right. What other question do you have?
Okay, so on your website you talk about how they live in certain areas, or some areas are more common than others, like certain states in the U.S. Why are those states
popular? Okay, so that was under the matrix of domination, the housing section, huh? So what we needed to do was we were just researching this theory, this idea of the matrix of domination is basically that all these different things, if you look here, this map I have, I guess, all of these things, housing, health, family, crime, media, education, all interrelate with each other and all affect the other areas. Like how they're portrayed in the media affects the family structure, the housing opportunities that they have. The housing opportunities affects the education that they're able to receive, and the crime in their neighborhood, and that affects family structure and health. And so all these things, the idea of the matrix of domination is that all these things are related together and kind of influence the other. So we were just looking up segregation in housing because some minority groups are really segregated in housing, like living in inner city projects or out in rural areas or reservations for like Native Americans and things like that. So some are really, really segregated. One of the things though that I found though with Arab Americans is that they're not so much. Uh, they are all over the country in every state. Every state has Arab American populations. But the research I found was just that most of them gather in places like New York, New Jersey, California, Michigan, Ohio were some of the top ones. And I think that there might be several reasons for this. I think part of it is one because, like we were just talking about, they kind of I think tend to like to group together a little bit. Not that they're being segregated into those areas, but that they kind of group together themselves. And then also, if you look at areas like New York, they tend to stick in those, like I said, the metropolitan areas. The bigger areas, I think maybe just there's more opportunity, more space for them to congregate together. I know just New York is a really common place for any minority group to migrate to want to go. Experience that I've had with other cultures. It's kind of where everyone wants to go. New York. Anyways, and so like in California is kind of the same way. I don't know, Michigan or Ohio. I don't know why. Anyways, did that answer your question? And what other question do you have?
Okay, so in one of your videos, you talk about how media has a lot of influence on how we think and feel.
Right.
So did the media start attacking them, saying that they were terrorists after 9/11 or before?
Like, did the idea that they were terrorists come about after that or before? So what's 9/11 is kind of a big moment for, I think, especially people like your age and my age, like our generation. 9/11 is a big pivotal point when the emphasis on terror really comes out. But that's not the beginning of it. They've been kind of labeled as violent terrorist groups way longer before that. It's just the attack of 9/11 was a huge attack on American soil, huge number of fatalities, and it just called a huge response of the people. And so the media plays a part, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. The media plays a huge part, I think, in how Arabs are thought and how Arabs are seen. One, because it's so one-sided, right? When every time there's a terrorist attack or something like that, the scenes that they show are the violent terrorist groups running around with their machine guns in the air, celebrating, the act that they just did. They never ever show, the Muslims here in America who are mourning and are just as sad as any other American citizen that happened. They never show that. They never show or let them voice their opinion on how they feel. It's always so one-sided, and it's always so suggestive that they're all like this. And then not only that, but just terrorism groups. I talked about it on my website, you may have read it, how they never fail to mention that it's like Islamic terrorist groups or Arab terrorist groups. And they always group them together. It can never just be violent terrorist groups or radical terrorist groups. And they always group like the race or the religion together with the terrorist. And that doesn't help, because then we've just developed this association that they're always this way. Anyways, so let's see, teach the individual. So some of the things that we talked about, you kind of read about some of the different theories. That one of my favorite is the matrix of domination, like I kind of explained to you already. I think that's a really great theory. Like I said, it's just basically saying that everything's interrelated, that everything's going to influence the other, right? So the housing influences, like I already explained. The other one that I really liked for at least explaining racism against Islam, or Arabic, sorry, against Arab Americans, is the idea of social constructionism. I thought it was really cool because there are, let's see if I can put the 3 steps on here. Sure I did. The 3 steps of social constructionism. Maybe I didn't. Sure I did, probably somewhere here in the text. But anyways, just the idea, and I think that the media and everything plays a part in this as well. The idea that they are this way, that they are violent, that they are terrorists, right, is dreamt up and portrayed in the media heavily. So we, as white Americans, accept that idea and we internalize it, and then pretty soon that's what we think, that's what we see, and then our decisions are based on that. Like, I honestly haven't had that much experience with Arab Americans. So all I really have to base my thoughts and opinions on are what I see, what I read, what I hear, and greatly in the media, what's being portrayed is they're violent terrorists. one of the other interesting things we talked about was the contact hypothesis. The contact hypothesis talking about how the more contact a person has with someone of a different race or someone just different in general, generally will grow to realize the similarities and everything. So this was something I found really interesting. Is when I was actually talking in class during a presentation, I asked people what their first two thoughts were when I said the word Arabs. For the most part, it was terrorists, turbans, camels, deserts, sword swallowing, Aladdin, things like that, But there were a few people in the classroom who actually said kind or, patient, and I was kind of taken back. So I actually talked to them afterwards and said, well, yeah, I grew up and I had Arab neighbors, or I think one had served a mission and had Arab companions and taught Arab people. And they were the ones who said that they're really kind and they're actually really wonderful people. And so I think that just kind of shows that contact hypothesis. When someone actually takes the time to get to know a person or a people, they really do grow to focus more on similarities than differences and see what the good quality rather than what's being portrayed all the time in the media and stuff like that. So social constructionism kind of, we talked about that a little bit, and then how the contact hypothesis can be used to kind of break down those barriers of anyways. So let's see, another big one that we talked about that I felt really kind of related to especially Arab Americans was ethnic conflict and labeling people as the enemy. One, because literally terrorists have become the enemy of the United States, the enemy of the common good that we as Americans want. And we've so quickly labeled Arabs as terrorists and terrorists as the enemy. I mean, literally, I love this picture that I have on my website. Labeling, right? On this Islamic man's face, terrorist, Muslim, Saddam, militia, 9/11, suspect, all these things, and there's the conflict that comes from just having that perspective of what people are. We look and see how once these things have happened, once they've been labeled, see the attacks more than doubled after 9/11 because Arabs not only were Arabs, but they were labeled as the enemy. And that conflict kind of just came in, stepped in. So that was something that I found really interesting. Sorry, I was talking about two different things there. But I think, and then so I've actually found this book, Stop the Islamization of America. This book, I read the intro to it. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, these people's beliefs, and I think it's something that could be resolved with that contact hypothesis again. But some people just want to fight. I don't know. So let's see. Obstacles faced by Arab Americans. I think one of the biggest things, as far as them struggling to be equal here in America, is that they've got everyone has to stop this idea that they're all violent, that they're all bad. I think one of the things I talked about was that we just need to have programs where we involve Arabs and give them positions where we see how good they really are. Like I said, I haven't really had a lot of experience with them myself, but I'm sure if I have or had, I would think really highly of them. Because I am sure that not all of them are terrorists. I'm actually very sure that very few of them are. And most of the ones that live here in America, I'm sure are just wonderful people. So I think one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest obstacles for Arab Americans in our society today is kind of overcoming that image that's been shown and that construction that's been established here in our society that they are that way, all of them, and that we need to suspect them all the time. Let's see. Let's see. Can racism be eliminated? Yes, I honestly think racism. Well, yeah, I think it can be. It's not going to be overnight, and I think that's a lot of times what we kind of want. That's kind of what we strive for, is a change overnight. But something like that's not going to change overnight. And I think it's interesting to me when I look at it. You look driving home this weekend. We were talking to some of our buddies, and I asked them, what is race? And it was the same dilemma that we talked about in class. I mean, no one can really define what race is. And I think that's going to continue to change as you continue to get, interracial marriages and stuff like that. You're going to keep getting different colors of skin. And so it's at what point are we going to realize that it's just a changing thing? It's just this idea, right? You're going to have kids who are black but white, and how are you going to classify them, And I think as we continue to go along that path, it's going to get harder and harder to solely base it on color. I think that's going to be one thing that contributes to it. I think the fact that people are having more interactions with more people. I mean, you look at things like social media and the interactions that people can have with people all over the world. I think that's going to help kind of level the playing field, and people are going to realize that. I know that people are going to realize that not everyone is bad. So I think racism, yes, can be eliminated. I think people are going to start to realize that people are the same. I think scientific discoveries and education are going to play a huge part in it. They're going to realize that people aren't different. This idea of race is just that. It's an idea. It's not actual anything factual, and that we just need to ignore it almost. Not that we want to ignore differences. Differences are something that should be celebrated. Everybody has a different culture, but as far as trying to group people and classify them by skin color or by origin, where they came from, or something like that, I think it's going to change, but it's going to be slow. I don't know if you have any other questions or anything like that. All right.